Hello and welcome to the Naru FastCast with your hosts, Dave and Josh Masson.
Pull up a chair and listen to us discussing fasting and health-related topics.
Hi there and welcome to another episode of the Naru FastCast. So today I want to talk to you about CGMs, and that is basically continuous glucose monitors. Now you might have heard quite a bit about these or you might know nothing about it. So today I'm just going to talk to you about them, the benefits of them, maybe the negatives, and why you should probably try and use one once in your life. So the thing is, if you can have as much information to prepare you about what's going on in your body at the moment, it's just a positive, because we go through life not knowing what we're doing to our body, the routine that we're doing, what we're eating, what we're buying, how much we sleep, how much we don't sleep, all these types of things. We never really look under the hood and understand, well, is this optimal for me, or should I be doing something different? And we usually don't do that when we're sick. So the point of it is that if there are certain things that you can buy or you can do that you know work for you, then why not? So take food, for example. So a CGM is a continuous blood glucose monitor, okay? And it basically sits in your arm. So you put a device that stays in your arm for around about 14 days, and it just constantly monitors the volume of blood, your blood glucose. So every time you eat something, it will spike your blood glucose, and you can see how your body responds to it. Now, the interesting part about these CGMs is they sit in interstitial fluid, which means they aren't impacted by things like cortisol or ambient changes in stress, exercise, and all these types of things. They give quite a unique glucose response. And this is so important to understand how you respond to food. So if, for example, you spend a couple £100 a week on food and you're eating pretty much similar things most weeks, how do you know whether that's good for you or not? You know, how do you know if your body is actually responding to that in a really good way or not? So for example, my wife made me made the family a risotto. So she made it with bone broth as a base, and she soaked the rice in that, and she put chorizo, and we had organic chicken and all this type of stuff. And it was really, really, you would have thought that was a relatively healthy meal. And my blood glucose has never spiked more than when I ate that meal. And I don't eat rice or pasta very often at all, so I don't actually enjoy it. But just seeing how my body went from, if I have 2 teaspoons of honey after my food, it spikes to around about 7 or 8. Whereas this risotto spiked my blood sugar to 13.8. And that was just crazy to see how my body responds to certain foods. So when you're out spending a couple £100 a week on family shops and you're eating similar things, you just don't know whether actually it has an effect. So there's that. So if you think about all this money that you're spending out every week, and the argument against continuous glucose monitors is that they can be expensive. So they are around about 45 to 60 quid for like 2 weeks. But in that 2 weeks, you can gain so much information about how your body works. Now, there's things like the Zoe, where they basically will give you a CGM and they then track you over a couple of weeks, and they will then give you dietary advice around that. Now, the thing is this can change. So it's very much linked on your microbiome, so the part of your gut where all the bacteria remain. And so if you were to have, for example, like a bout of gastritis, or you were to have quite a few bouts of broad spectrum antibiotics, this can all change the level of gut flora and the expression of it, and this can then have an impact on how you may respond to food going forward. So it can definitely change. You can change with weight, with age, with stress, with sleep. So what is interesting is actually truly understanding that when you eat your food and how you eat food and what you eat will all change during the day, and you can really see how optimal your body is to deal with sugar at different times. Now, why is this so important? Well, those kind of 5 horsemen of metabolic health, which is, we get hypertension, we get diabetes, we get obesity, we get non-alcoholic fatty liver disease, and we get high cholesterol. Now, really what tends to sit at the bottom of all that, then starts to brew underneath, is the insulin problem. So you get high release of insulin and you get high levels of circulating glucose. Now, we know that one of the biggest attributes we can have to defend against ill health and aging is muscle, because muscle stores all of this stuff. So insulin is a storage signaling hormone. So if you eat some carbohydrate, your body then is going to release insulin, and it's going to want to store it somewhere. Now, we've said this before, but if you're a diabetic, you will have around about 10 grams of glucose in your entire blood circulating around. Now, if you are non-diabetic, you have 5. Okay, so that's not a huge difference. 5 grams is like around about a teaspoon of sugar difference. But when you think about the storage capacity, if your lean muscle mass isn't full of fat and it's optimal, then you have around about 300 to 400 grams you can store in your muscles of glycogen, which is sort of stored glucose. And you've also got around about 150 grams that can store into your liver. So really what we need to think about is that if you do put a CGM on, which I really advise doing, for that amount of money and the amount of money you're spending on food, it just seems like a bit of a no-brainer. You're spending, hundreds of pounds a month on food, but you don't even know if it's good for you or not, or how your body responds to it. So you put one of these things on and you can then manipulate so many different things. Some people find that they do HIIT training in the morning and it massively spikes their glucose. And they do HIIT training at night and it causes a massive dump of their glucose. So actually working with your body and seeing what works for you can have such a profound effect. And then not only that, the best thing about it is if you're fasting, is to actually check your blood sugar levels and go, I'm really, really hungry. And then you go, okay, well, let me just check, and you scan it and you look at your readings. You go, my blood sugar levels are completely flat. So it's not a case of my blood sugar levels are dipping down. And what we do with Naru Revive is we recommend that during that period that you make sure you're hydrating with minerals. And you really find that if you're hungry in those periods during a fast, to go and have some salt and some water. And it really just seems to point to the fact that you're actually dehydrated. And this has been such a game changer for me. And this is partly on the foundations we started looking at minerals and salt and dehydration during fasting and just in general health, when we realized that actually we habitualize so many things in terms of our hunger that we go, oh God, I feel hunger, but actually quite a lot of time it's boredom, or it's just habit. It's this time of the day I need to eat. And when you look at your blood sugar levels, you don't need to wait until they crash, but you can kind of go, oh, well, I'm actually doing okay. And, if you go off, I did this the other day where I was with my boys, we went down the woods. And so we went down to the woods and it was around about 10:30 and I took some water down with some Naru Revive in it. And I was thinking, God, we ended up coming back about 1 o'clock. So I looked at my sort of fasting app and I thought, God, it's been 17 hours, 18 hours almost. And I looked at my blood sugar levels, completely stable, haven't moved an inch. And the reason is your body tightly regulates this. And it doesn't, and this is why if you're not eating, it's important not to restrict your calories too much. You don't want to be dumping calories out of your diet too much. You want to be making sure that you're getting good calories from whole foods that are nutritiously dense and eating less times during the day. But it doesn't necessarily mean you need to completely rip out calories because they're bad for you. Calories aren't bad for you. It's just the calories you're choosing to eat. So why I think continuous glucose monitors are fantastic is they're so easy to use. You put them in the arm and you leave them on for 2 weeks. I've just had one on. It's only just come off today, annoyingly, for doing this podcast. But I just find it just helps me to recalibrate my diet. If I'm eating certain, if I'm eating loads of carbohydrates in the evening, most people are less less insulin sensitive in the evening time. And I seem to be okay in the evening, but it's definitely different to when I have a high glucose, more glucose in the morning. I'm so much more sensitive. So around about sort of, 12 o'clock, 11 o'clock when I break my fast, I tend to have a majority of my carbohydrates then. And then if I'm fasting, usually from Friday through to Sunday, when I can exercise at the end of my fasting period, I tend to have usually majority of my carbohydrates within that period after I've exercised. So it is really interesting. And we also talk a little bit about the timing of carbohydrates after your timing of carbohydrates after you finish your meal. And you've also got these few different tools. So one thing is, after you break your fast, you probably want to break your fast with with less lactose, with more protein, fats like from avocado, and trying to have less carbohydrate during that period, because your body will be quite sensitive to glucose. And again, you can really see that. But how do you offset that? If you do need to have some carbohydrate, or you want to have some carbohydrate, then what are the tools that you can use to mitigate glucose spikes? Now, we talk about these tools, and I've talked about them quite a few times, but using the continuous glucose monitor, you can actually see that they work. So you've got a few things. Having some acid before you have your carbohydrate, which would be things like acetic acid from sort of fermenting veg. So that would be like your kimchi and things like that. You can have your citric acid from your citric fruits. And you can also have your lactic acid from fermenting things like apples and, apple cider vinegar and things like that. The other thing you can do is timing. So you have your vegetables first, fat and protein, and then your carbohydrates at the end. You can also leave the carbohydrates slightly longer after your meal, and that can have a massive effect. And the other thing is trying not to have naked carbs, trying to have some form of fat or protein before. So for example, if you can eat yogurt, having some yogurt before, or some nuts before you have your carbohydrate, will have a massive impact in how your body receives and stores and that glucose, or that carbohydrate that you're bringing into your body. Trust me, these things do genuinely work. Like when you look at them on your continuous blood glucose monitor and you can see it happening in real time in your body, you go, wow, this is actually amazing. We talk very much about not eating 3 hours before bed. And we also talk about how the body, due to melatonin rising, becomes really insensitive to the signaling of insulin. So if you eat something within 3 hours going to go to bed, or even when it's dark outside, the body is starting to raise melatonin up, and melatonin sort of tells the insulin, hold on, we don't need so much because we're going to bed, we're not going to be eating, so we don't need this to be signaling through the night. So when you eat something, your blood glucose will stay higher throughout the day. And this is so much more apparent if you aren't insulin sensitive. So if your cells, your body aren't sensitive to the signaling of insulin, that's where it can stay elevated throughout the night, which is why it's not a great idea to eat 3 hours before you go to bed, or within an hour or two after waking. So if you wanted to buy one of these, you can buy them from pharmacies, you can go online and get them. I cannot recommend them more highly, because we all have these ideas about what should be good for us, and how we read these things about doing keto, carnivore, fasting, and all these different types of things. But it's also a good thing to work out whether it really works for your body, and if the routine that you do suits it and actually is optimal for it. And a really easy, cheap thing to do to start off with, considering that poor glucose levels and high insulin levels are really at the root cause of lots of our conditions these days. Starting with a continuous glucose monitor for 50 or 60 quid, I think is a really good start, considering we'll pay so much money for all the other things we have in our life, and yet we really tend to leave health behind, lagging in the investment we have. And if you notice something now that you could do something about, that can then set the path for the next 10 years or next 50 years of your life, then surely that's a good thing. And like I said to you right at the start, how much you're spending on your food, whether it's you're buying lunches, you're buying and preparing meals, just make sure that the money or the effort that you're making into preparing these meals is actually going to be beneficial for your body and the way that you work. And they've done some amazing studies where they've given 2 people ice cream and they've looked at how one person's response is completely blunted, it does nothing for their blood sugar levels, and the other person has a skyrocket response. And this is the thing with health. Hopefully you're listening to lots of our podcasts and you follow lots of our stuff, and we do really feel that fasting is a really good thing to have at the foundation and the core of your health sort of journey. But it might not work for you. You might find that 14 hours is a really good fasting length for you. So just not eating 3 hours before you go to bed, not eating for a couple of hours after you wake up, and that works well for you. That keeps you healthy, keeps your body shape, keeps you energized in the morning, and that's what you may need. But you might find that you may benefit from a slightly longer fast. Well, how do you know what that's doing to your blood sugar levels, which is one of the things people try to go to fasting for, is to improve certain markers of health? Well, put one of these in your arm and work out what it does for you. And these things are all things that you can change. So one of the biggest organs in your body that has one of the most profound effects on your health and longevity is your muscle. Now, the thing is that you can do something about muscle mass. You can train it, you can move it, you can make it bigger and it does take effort, but you think you're in control of that. You can't go, right, I'm going to optionally make my liver more healthy, or I'm going to optionally make my gut more healthy. You can add things in, but you don't always know whether it's really doing well. Whereas you can actually actively train your muscles to get bigger, and you will improve so much of your health. It is unbelievable. So knowing things that you can do, that tangible, that you can change, I think is a real powerful tool. And I think if it means that you change the way that you go and buy food and you can play around with things, and maybe there's certain things you've been restricting out of your diet that you thought I couldn't eat, but now you realize that you can, I think go for it. I think put one of these in, make the investment, try and have a little look and see how you can do certain things that you can be in control of and that makes it easy and replicable, that you can replicate in your diet or in your lifestyle, and it means that it'll stick. So I really, really feel that if you want to find even more information out about these, you can message me. I can take the one that I use. I can also send you some links about where you can find other things. But ultimately, it's an expensive outlay, but I think it's really worth doing it so you can monitor what is going on inside. So thank you so much for listening to another episode of the Naru FastCast. I really hope you're enjoying them. If you are enjoying them, please go to our wherever you listen to our podcast and give us a review. And we would really, really love that, even if it's just some stars to say how much you're enjoying the podcast, or if you do have a bit extra time, adding that little review makes a massive difference. Thank you so much.